Hello everyone, welcome on today's on today's GitLab retrospective for 10.8 release. The first item from the previous retrospective improvement task is mine. The last time we had troubles on figuring out who is like the maintainer, active maintainer of GitLab pages. So we actually fixed this situation by assigning actually, Nick was already a maintainer, but also assigning Alessio as a maintainer of GitLab pages. To you, Tommy.
I think Tommy's out. I'll take Tommy's item here. So we have added the exception request template that requires approvals from multiple engineering leads, and that's done. You can see the improvements in this release, which we'll touch on later down the road. We have accepted 2 out of total of 7 exception requests. And that's the improvements we made in this release and going forward. To you, Robert.
Yeah, thanks, Mac. One of our biggest goals for this release was to speed up kind of the entire release process. James did a ton of great work in this area in the past month. You can see the request link there. I took a production deploy down from 150 minutes down to 45, which is a huge quality of life improvement for the release managers when you're the one that has to sit and babysit this thing and kind of just watch it go. There's more improvements coming in this area, mostly around lowering the barrier to performing the release, doing a lot of stuff from Slack. And there's more issues like there, and that's what we got going on this month. That's on Stan.
Yeah, we did a few monitoring improvements. The big ones that happened this past month were delayed email notifications and CI jobs, and Jarvan and Tomas added alerts around those. The other blind spot we've had for a while is the PG bouncer. Everything goes through PG bouncer, and we don't have any monitoring around it. We've shipped the now Prometheus exporter in 11.0. We haven't deployed it at GitLab.com, but we did it for the Google production site. So you can see the dashboard there. It's a very rudimentary one, but I'd like to get it going for GitLab.com if we can, but it may require upgrading the package. So that's a different story. Mac.
Thank you, Stan. So another follow-up item from the last improvement task is we've now make sure that all the QA items for release is tracked in a single place. So we have a one bird's eye view to everything. This is now in effect going forward for the regular monthly release and also the patch releases. The issue is there, and you can click on the 1.10.8 QA task, which has everything contained in one issue. Moving on, I have the next item as well. So this month, I just want to give for questions. I think the team is asking the right questions and keeping ourselves honest to what is really needed. And on to you, Mara and Filipa.
Thank you, Mac. So the release process itself went really well for this milestone. We tagged 13 releases, 7 of them were deployed to production. RC3 landed in production on the day of the feature freeze, before the feature freeze was enforced, which gave us a really great start. The timing for the deployments improved drastically. Deploying to production now only takes 50 minutes and to staging 20 minutes, more or less. And that is great, and I cannot emphasize that enough, because prior to that, deploying to production was taking 2.5 hours, sometimes 6 hours, sometimes 8 hours, and to staging was taking 1 hour. So really having shorter deployments really help us make our job faster. And really thank you, James Lopez, for that, because you did that improvement, so thank you. And we also had more than 85% of the Q&A coverage for these 13 releases. Well, thank you, everyone who helped us achieve that. And passing to Filipa.
Hey, just adding to that, there's a RC breakthrough, but I just wanted to point at exactly what Myra said. Our first RC1 was cut on 30th of April. And the diff between the RC1 and 10.7.2 was about 244 commits on EE. I will link to a snippet. Sorry for having done it earlier. And the RC4 was the first release tagged after the 7, and it added more than 1,000 commits in 4 working days, which causes a few problems and causes the deploy to be a little bit longer than it should be. And also wonder what went well this month. we didn't need any extra hours to deploy anything. And I think both me and Myra have the same feeling that working with James, Robert, and Mary, and that they had our backs all the time was very helpful. Also, Victor and Bob made a very good job making clear exactly what needed to be done regarding GDPR, and they were very aware of everything on the release process, and also the same towards Nick, and the communication between the GCP migration and the release managers was very good. Robert, you have a point, not sure.
Yeah, I just added one snippet with some RC data. I don't really have anything to add beyond what Philippa and Myra already pointed out, other than just like, yeah, you can tell that feature freeze day, we added a ton of stuff. Philippe.
Yeah, thank you. 10.8 was a great milestone for us too, as the security products team. We are now able to ship some backend code. This is pretty new for us since we joined GitLab 3 months ago. We were doing mostly Docker embedded images. So that's a great step for us. And speaking of Docker images, we have refactored the SAST engine, which is now a lot faster and a lot more efficient because we're using Docker images, and everything is now completely isolated. So that's a very good step for us as well. And it's up to Mac now.
Thank you, Philippe. So I just want to take some time to thank the team on the GCP failover test planning. I think it involves a lot of people from different functions, and I think we now have a solid plan going forward. So thank you, everybody, for the help here. To you, Victor, for GDPR.
Sure. So thank you, Philippa, for the kind words on how things went well for GDPR. So essentially, in my opinion, things went fairly well, given the cards we were dealt. And namely, we were, as a product development team, not aware that we had to make this change until essentially 1 month prior to the drop dead deadline, which is May 25th. And so we had to scramble to come up with a plan to adhere to it. So a plan meaning the software that needs to be developed, the operational flow that needs to be done accordingly. And so, for example, if we knew about this requirement, and I've already reflected this to my boss and other folks, if we knew about this earlier on, then a lot of the things that didn't go well could have been done, essentially in software. And most of the people here are software engineers, and we rely on software. And we couldn't rely on software because we had so little time to develop the features, and thus we had to rely on humans to do a lot of things. And so essentially we had to create a very minimal implementation of GDPR acceptance, and we had to implement it in multiple stages with multiple RCs in order to satisfy the requirements. If we'd known about this, say, just 2 months prior, we would have built the feature with more full-fledged feature. We could do things in the app or even automate certain features, and we wouldn't have to have so many moving parts. Consequently, we had to involve a lot of folks operationally. We had production team, release managers, marketing team to do the marketing, folks, of course, legal and design, and product and so forth. And so, not an excuse, but we have very little experience doing these types of things. For example, when, as a product manager myself, when I'm involved in a feature, I don't consider what happens when the feature is shipped out and people start viewing it. Do we need to change anything in real time? So we had very little experience in this area, and therefore that really showed. And in particular, the one obvious one that a lot of people saw was on the 22nd. We put a banner up that was a terrible decision. We had very little eyes on it prior, and it was an unforced error. And had UX looked at that banner message, they would probably have said that that was a bad idea. So it's my final comment here is it's hard to improve this type of thing going forward, since this is a one-time thing, GDPR, once in a lifetime thing, hopefully. And also the fact that we need to do operations type of thing in real time is not something we typically do at GitLab. Maybe we will in the future, but I don't see it on the horizon. So unfortunately, for me, I don't see a lot of opportunities for improvement here. I think Dal, we had some points, probably removed it. Nick, you have some points, and Yo, feel free to chime in, or other folks can read.
Nick can read my points. Yeah.
Yeah, Nick, you and Nick, I'm just reading your point here, Nick. It says, can we set up better monitoring of compliance changes generated as well? How can we filter these? Yeah, no, that's a great question. I gave this feedback to Job, and so GDPR was put into law, I believe, 2 years ago, and in terms of a thing, well, I don't know what the legal term is, but it was passed 2 years ago, and companies had 2 years to get ready. Essentially, I had a month to get ready, and our team had a month to get ready. So I don't know what the answer for that is to improve.
And the point is just that legal changes happen from time to time. GDPR is a once in a lifetime thing, but next year, another law affecting a different area of GitLab could come into effect. And it would be good if we could pick up on that sooner. And presumably there are feeds we can consume for these kinds of changes.
Right. So is Job on the call? You had a point, or did you say?
Yeah, I'm on the call. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, just to reply to Nick, I will talk with Jamie about this as well. I agree. We should have known this earlier. I wasn't aware of it much earlier, so my bad as well. But other than that, I thought it went really well, given how little time we had. Like the banner that was up, I really don't think it was a big issue. It was confusing, so we turned it off, which is very much the GitLab way. I did see the Stan LinkedIn issue that is still that we still haven't fixed, so we should get onto that. But other than that, I would say that yes, we should have more time next time. But overall, given the time that we had this time, I think we did pretty well.
Great, thanks, Job. Stan, did you want to talk about that point really quickly, or?
No, it's just one thing I think a lot of people have hit. You could create a new issue and it has the previous contents filled, and it doesn't feel like we've moved on it at all.
Right. So maybe a separate point about this particular regression we haven't addressed this regression. That's a great point. Thank you. If nothing else about GDPR, Mech, you're up again.
Thank you, Victor. So I want to touch on the instability that we had around the RC8 timeframe onwards. The term onwards and timeframe scares me a lot because the team doesn't really know what went wrong, and I think we still have an open issue that we still need to resolve. So we had multiple attempts by our team to try to fix it. Thank you, everybody involved. And Philippa, you had a point there. So we are not sure, the arms are not sure that it is because of RC8, correct? Do you want to touch on something here?
No, it's just exactly that. I don't think we are sure if it was RC8, although everything points to it.
Got it. Thank you. And yeah, to Yorick's point, we need to deploy more frequently in a smaller chunks so we know what change caused it or if it's something else. Stan and Yorick, do you have anything you want to chime in here in the instability issue?
I don't have anything else to add other than, we looked really hard at the changes that landed between RC7 and RC8, and they're really, really small changes. And it's not clear to me. It was just coincidental that we had some events or something hitting our system in a different way, but I agree with the need to doing incremental deployments. It's beneficial in general, and I think we're moving in that direction. So I'm happy to see that the RCs are at least smaller in diffs.
Got it. So I think the team should strive for this, at least on the manual part for 11.0, because we also have the GCP migration happening this release, and it's one of the most important initiatives for us right now. Thank you. So if nobody has anything else, moving on to Philippe.
Yes, thank you, Mick. We have learned the hard way to plan and to schedule our issues and features, and especially if we have to synchronize with other team like the UX and QA team. Meaning, if we're waiting for the UX to be ready, it could be 1 or 2 weeks. And if we plan to have 1 week of QA, that means literally we have 1 to 2 weeks to develop new features. So that's something pretty new for us because we were used to work on our, isolated team. So now we are planning accordingly. Another issue we had, and it's still the case, the RCs are deployed to production before the code freeze with some code that is not from the code freeze day, so meaning the 7 of the day. It could be some code from the 2. And to answer Marin that is not here, the issue is that we are not only shipping code directly inside GitLab, we are shipping code as well as Docker images. So we have to synchronize these new Docker images that we're pushing to the code that is pushed with the merge request or anything related to GitLab directly. And it's really hard for us to synchronize that. And sometimes it could lead to having SAST or DAS or container scanning completely broken for some day because we didn't realize that RC was deployed, and it's really hard to anticipate. So we need to figure out a way to fix this. Also, my team is relying a lot on CI, and we had a lot of issues there. No hard feelings, but we're spending a lot of time on the CI to test everything and to make sure that we're shipping features that are ready to production. So we lost a lot of time waiting for CI this month, and I just wanted to raise that to you. Also, regarding the planning, we are underestimated our deliverables, and also because we need to synchronize with other teams like the UX and QA team. And now we are planning way ahead of that. During the kickoff, we are planning the whole iteration at once. That means no one is able to take holidays or free days during this iteration if we don't schedule it the time before. So we are planning a lot more in advance, and it's a lot more than that because we are planning also UX one iteration before. And you say, how can we factor in better planning and account for more time in the schedule? What we're doing actually is reducing the number of features that could be deliverable in a feature in a milestone, so that we have time to handle bugs and everything, and also make sure that we can synchronize with the other teams, like the UX team, for example. Does that make sense to you?
Sounds good. Thank you.
And it's up to Dewey. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you, Philippe. So on May 8th, we had a particularly painful CTE Emerge, and the RC4 merge request, 10.8 RC4 merge request was affected by that issue as well. On the 7th or the 6th or whatever, we merged two features into CE that were actually features that were backported from EE. And on CE, everything was green. On EE, everything was green. Like the smaller merge request that made some changes to EE to account for the backport was green. But then when we actually tried to merge CE into EE again, we hit a lot of issues, build failures and migrations issues caused by us not having accounted for all of the different upgrade paths that exist between CE and EE. Going from, of course, CE 10.7 to CE 10.8 and EE 10.7 to EE 10.8 is relatively well tested, and that's, I guess, the most common flow that people go through. But we need to, of course, support upgrades and downgrades and side grades as well, and we didn't. And as you can see, we needed about 11 or 12 merge requests to fix that issue. The CTE merge request that was open for, I think, a day and a half or almost 2 days. Well, usually these get merged within 6 hours. So that didn't go great. To fix this, we've done one thing already. We've added a new CI build to both CE and EE that will automatically verify that a CE to EE upgrade is possible. And Stan suggests doing the opposite thing with EE to CE as well, which is a great idea. And I'm guessing we're going to discuss that separately. So that's already one step in the right direction. And then Thiago also started drafting documentation on how to backport features from EE to CE in general without causing trouble like this all around, because there's some non-intuitive aspects to it, where you really have to think about people going from CE to E and back to CE. It's a huge headache, and we're going to do better in the future. Mac asks, should GitLab QA cover testing the downgrade path? I think that would be useful. We can test it on the CE side, but of course you're never in those repos, but you're not going to have the full downgrade or upgrade tested. And that is definitely something that QA would be better at. I suggest we discussed it more in separate issues. All right, so then we are done with the bad and we're going on to the good. How can we improve, Philippe?
Yes, going back to this planning and schedule issues that we had, we decided to schedule UX as soon as possible, meaning we are doing that one release earlier. For example, for the security dashboard that we're going to ship for 10.0. We are doing right now the UX so that the backend and the front-end team will be able to start at the beginning of the iterations. It's the only way for us to be able to plan and to schedule everything for the iteration. Otherwise, we would need to wait for the UX label to be ready, and we can just wait for issues like that, where we have too many features and issues to fix. So that's the new way to work for us, and it's working well. And as Sean pointed, this is now what we call the design artifact. When we need something from the UX that is the deliverable in one iteration, it's a design artifact. So it's one iteration earlier again, and it's a deliverable. And once we have that, we can start working on this, and not before having this. And so up to Pedro.
Pedro has bad Wi-Fi, but I think he was just clarifying that not everything should be design artifacts. And I guess if you want to use those, just speak to Pedro, Sarah, and the rest of the UX team. Philippa, do you want to go next? Well, you're next.
So towards what Philippe just said, there was a discussion on the CI/CD retrospective that later evolved into a Slack discussion that is, it goes in the same lines, but the highlights, you have the links there. The highlights are that we are kind of working on a kind of a waterfall methodology process instead of the iteration one between everyone, like UX, product, and engineering, when an issue is scheduled to be delivered. There is a feeling of lacking of ownership when we ship broken things, and that also we are not quick enough to react after we ship broken things. And there's also another point that is highlighted in these discussions is that often the issue scope is so small that both UX and engineering teams have a very hard way of understanding exactly what we should be doing. We can move to the sharing the release managers process. So adding to what we said earlier, we learned a few things regarding release manager. The first is that release manager requires a lot of planning and a lot of calm throughout the process. We also learned that not all peak into stable labeled merge requests are legit regressions. There were only 3 of 9 exception requests were approved. And there seems to be a misunderstanding between the peaking to stable bugs versus regression. So a regression from 10.6 is no longer a regression in 10.8. It's a bug and should not be labeled as peaking to stable. We also learned that being release manager requires to say no a lot, and that sometimes you'll have to fight for it and lose a few hours doing that. And that the security release is very hard to manage. We have a few points what can still be improved. So the security release is for us the hardest. It's very hard to be aware of everything that needs to go in a security release. It's difficult to understand which team is responsible for each parts of the process. And we both feel that there is a lack of coordination and communication between the release manager and the security team. Often we just fall back to Maren, and Maren at the point, I'm not sure if you're here, Maren, probably not. And Mary points that they are also difficult because they are the opposite of the normal process. Everything is not open on the security release. There is also, we also think that Q&A ownership and priority needs to be improved. Although the Q&A task is a lot better than it used to be, the things are not tested quick enough, which we often release, we often deploy to production before the Q&A task is closed, which kind of defeats the process, the purpose of the Q&A task. We also think that if we didn't merge everything on the 6 and 7, we could make deploys a lot faster and the release process a lot better. Myra, do you want to go to the next point?
Yes, thank you, Felipa. So in general, we have the impression that the release is not completely understood by most of the engineers. And that might be logical because if we visit the release manager page, we can notice that not even the 20% of the engineers have participated as release managers. So that means that the 80%, the other 80% is not fully aware of the implication that a release conveys. And we totally get it. I mean, Felipe and I were expected to fully understand the process with just a week. And And that was not realistic because we have been doing the releasing for the last 3 milestones, and we still have like many questions. And it really needs a lot of commitment and a lot of work. Even as a trainee, there is something always to do each day. And sadly, in this release, we lost a trainee, and that was like completely out of our hands. And well, another thing that can be improved are exception requests. As release manager, it is really uncomfortable to say no to our teammates, because our teammates are awesome, and we don't really enjoy being the bad cop and push back and say no. But then again, saying no is our default answer to all the exception requests. So we should really rethink when opening an exception request. Like, we should really think that I am assured my merge request is urgent. Like, it cannot wait another month. Like, my merge request has a major impact, and I have a certain amount of confidence that my merge request won't break anything. And if I can honestly answer yes to all of those questions, then I should open an exception request, because then your exception is actually exceptional. And finally, we wanted to thank James, Robert, and Marin for always having our backs, and for everything they taught us, and for all the times that they fixed what we screwed. And to anyone who also took ownership to the CTE Emerge, which allow us to make our job faster. And of course, to the production team for always being around and doing an amazing job under difficult and challenging circumstances. Thank you. And we should hug you when we can. And I don't see any other points. So anyone has anything to add?
Well, the one thing that came out of this release to me was that the patch release criteria was much lower. So the barrier to getting something into 10.8 was high, but 10.8.1 it was much lower. So, and I think there's a discussion that Mike is open about, should we really have, those 2 different standards? But to me, it's interesting, because if I were releasing something, I would say, well, I can wait till 10.8.1. I don't have to ask for the exception. It gets released a day or 2 afterwards. Should that be communicated to people? Or should the standard actually be the same for a patch release and a point release?
But also, like, my question then is, how we make a difference between patch release and the RCs? Because, like, I know that we can react faster on GitLab.com, but our customers accept patch releases to be more stable, and us picking changes into patch releases that are maybe exceptional actually makes things less stable. So we actually reduce the stability of our on-premise customers, which is not really like something easy to like revert and react, because our base of users that are using that are much higher than just GitLab.com, probably.
I think I can answer your questions. So the reason why we were so picky on RCs and not on the first patch release was, I think it was around RC8. We were picking everything that had the pick into stable label. And then we realized that there were a lot of things that weren't legit regressions, and they were causing more regressions that they weren't on the RC tagged on the 7. So that was why we were so picky about it. For the others, on the first patch, we did go through all of them to make sure they were actually legit regressions for 10.8. And we did ask for a few exceptions, but we also did accept a few performance improvements that weren't actually like a regression from 10.8. But yes, we have that problem.
I suggest looking at that issue. It might create a good issue about standards of patch release. So please add your comments there.
Okay, I think time check, we are only 1 minute left. I would like to take some time to go over the list and then assign the action items to people. So going out from the top, I think Victor and Philippe, I think we are getting the same theme from you guys, where we're saying that we don't have enough time to plan. Does it make sense to team both of you up to factor this process change in and then broadcast it to the rest of engineering if it works out for you guys? Okay, thank you. I'll mark this for both of you then. And then Stan and Dawe, should we create an issue to cover the EE to CE upgrade test? Yep. I will do that. And then, well, the big chunk is the feature freeze and a lot of changes coming in. I know Myra and Philippe are used to the release managers for 11.0, and we have TCP migration. I will assign you folks to this, and then for any fallback or any findings, let's factor it into the release documentation. Is that okay? Thank you. I think we are out of time, but do we have time to pick up the questions from the YouTube chat? Anything there?
Everything should be answered there already directly, Mac. So I think we're good.
Okay, great. I think that's it. Thank you, everybody, for joining the 10.8 retrospective. We'll see you guys again next month. Thank you for your time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.